This meeting is being recorded.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Blend Live podcast with your host, Ricardo Rice, and my co-host,
Simone Sherry.
Okay, so I know y'all have never seen this many faces in one panel for the show, so we're beyond excited and extremely nervous because I've never seen this many boxes on one show, but it's all good because one of these faces, you know, DA Flynn Brody, we are so excited to have you, sir. How is it going today?
It's great. It's great to be here. It's good to see you and Simone. Haven't seen you guys in quite a while, but so it's good to see your happy faces.
I know. I think the last time we saw you had just gotten into office, and we were just like, "Hey, you're that guy now." So to actually see after all the smoke is settled and all that good stuff after the case, it's exciting to have you here as well. And you also brought your team. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, starting with Linda, then Cameron, then Charles.
All right. Hello. My name is Linda Dunikoski. I'm a senior assistant district attorney here in Cobb County.
Good morning or good afternoon. I am Cameron Watson. I'm the Director of Security here for the Cobb County District Attorney's Office.
Hey, good morning. I'm Charles Prescott. I'm currently the Chief Investigator here at Cobb County District Attorney's Office.
All right, so let's start from the beginning, and I'm gonna let DA Brody kind of tell the story of how this landed with you guys, because this did not take place in Cobb. It took place in Brunswick. So I'll let you tell the story about how the trail happened and ended up in your lap or you guys' lap.
And Linda, you can correct me if I say anything wrong, but this happened in February of 2020, February 23rd of 2020. The McMichaels and Mr. Bryant committed the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. The original case at that time was investigated by the Glenn County PD. And for what we understand is they were told not to make an arrest. The district attorney for that district, Jackie Johnson, recused herself from the case and sent the case to George Barnhill, who then recused himself because his son worked for Jackie Johnson. The case then went to Term Durden, and he asked for the GBI to come on board because of the lack of resources for his office. And from there, the Attorney General assigned the case to Cobb County. The district attorney at the time, Joyette Holmes, was here. She took on the case and started the work towards the prosecution of the killers of Ahmaud Arbery.
All right, so the team that you have now, was this a team that you put together, or how did this team come together? Or these were all people that were working under you when you got in office?
They were all working for the office when I came in office. The original lead prosecutor left the office. Linda was on the team at that time, and I selected Linda to take over the prosecution of the office because of her experience, her trial experience in Atlanta, in the Fulton County DA's office. And just the fact that, as soon as I came in the office, Linda was sending me information about the case, about different things about the office, preparing me for the job that I was about to take on place. So I had full confidence in Linda taking over. We had just brought Larissa in onto the team, and also Paul came in a little bit later. Now the investigation team was led by Charles right from the beginning, and Cameron, the head of security, was on the team at that time. And then Sarah, who's here, she came on a little bit later once we got into the trial portion of the team.
I feel like now that you mentioned Sarah, now you have to introduce yourself. I was gonna let you off the hook, but since Brody kind of threw you under the bus, now you have to introduce yourself.
All right. Well, my name's Sarah Rapp. I am the communication specialist. I just reached my 6 months here, and I moved here. And then I literally a month later, Brunswick. It's an incredible experience. I got to help Linda, Paul, and Larissa with anything they needed, whether it was setting up the printer or looking up social media of the jurors, making sure they weren't. And I do the press releases and help with the interviews. So I am very lucky to be.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to segue to Linda for a second, because many people will discover if they do research that you were in the APS scandal. really briefly tell me about your role in that, or tell us about your role in that.
Sure. So I started with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office back in 2002 and did everything from burglaries and entering autos to crimes against women and children. And then I moved into the major case division doing homicides back in 2006. So I was assigned to a lot of big cases and any sort of specialty prosecution, which included the Atlanta Public School cheating scandal trial. And I was a team member there. As you know, the lead investigator, well, not the lead investigator, the lead prosecutor is Fonnie Willis, who is now the elected official of Fulton County. She and I had been trial partners for years on numerous homicide cases, had worked together. And so she became the lead prosecutor in that case, along with Clint Rucker, Brett Pinion, and Shondina Morris and myself. And so we were the team that put it together along with John Floyd, who is an expert in RICO throughout the state. So that was a big case. That was a long case. We started jury selection in August of, 2014, and we received our verdict April 1st of 2015. So it was 4 days on, 3 days off. It was brutal, and it was really interesting because it was tragic to see what had happened to these children. They were cheated out of remedial education. And what most people don't realize about that case is that every time that teacher changed those scores for that child and that child passed, that child did not get federal funding for additional resources like textbooks, special education, special tutoring, all that sort of thing. So a lot of people felt like, well, it didn't harm the children. It actually did, because it took federal funding away from that child, so that child could not move forward educationally. And unfortunately, within the criminal justice system, what we see when we ask people, how far did you go in school? They tend to have dropped out in the 10th grade. There seems to be this sort of sophomore dropout. And we found that it was tied to not being able to read and write once they got to be in high school as sophomore. And that then put them into the pipeline, unfortunately, into the criminal justice system, which was a real tragedy that we didn't want to see. So having done that, I then segued back into trying homicide cases, but really wanted to do appeals. And they, assigned me the appeal for the Atlanta Public School cheating scandal. So I was working on that appeal and really liked it. But then Joyette Holmes had an opportunity for me to come head up the appeals division here in the Cobb County District Attorney's Office. So I took that, having tried homicides and big cases for 17 years, I was a little tired and decided I didn't really want to be that trial warrior anymore. I wanted to kind of go into appeals, protect our good convictions that we had achieved, and took this opportunity to come to Cobb. And then when the murder happened of Ahmaud Arbery, Joyette called me and said, you've got a lot of experience. We'll put you on as the appellate person to back up the lead prosecutor, which made perfect sense. As a team member, I was there to do the motions and get it indicted and do all of those things that were necessary. And that is how I ended up here.
So you're supposed to be you got the Cobb and thought, oh, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a nice, and then bam, trial of the century. We need you on the front lines again.
Correct.
Sounds like fun. How did that work out for you?
It was exhausting. It was absolutely exhausting. Even just being a member of the team, we got hit with so many motions by the defense, so many motions to put in evidence, so many motions to keep out our evidence, attacks on the indictment. A lot of motions were filed, and that was sort of, my bailiwick. That's where I was, going to shine and do all of that. So did all that through January of 2021. Larissa got brought in. She and I split up the motions to go ahead and do that. And we did the motions hearing in May of 2021, which was another couple of days of brutal knockdown, drag out warfare.
I have a quick question that I think everyone can answer before we get deeper into the trial.
Okay, wait, before you do that, Linda warned me about that. So you might have to pin it to persons first, because she was like, either we're gonna hear crickets or everybody's gonna answer at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. That's totally fine. We can back up and start with DA Brody and then maybe work our way around, because one of my questions was, the last time we spoke, we were talking really about the transition and kind of everything that goes into transitioning to a new level of leadership at the county, like in a district attorney's office. And we do try to do a lot of education on these shows too. So maybe we could kind of talk about what the transition was like, how new you were into your administration really before this case fell in your lap, because I know there's a lot going on as it is, like we're in the middle of a pandemic, there's a judicial emergency, like there's more than one thing affecting, I think, a smooth transition of leadership. So maybe we could even kind of talk about just what it was like coming on board and what kind of an introduction this has been, and start with the DA and work our way to Charles and Cameron and then back to Linda.
Well, for me, because this happened probably 9 months after I declared that I was running. So I knew it was always going to be a case that if I won the election, that I was going to have to assume. And fortunately for me, I had Linda sending me stuff as soon as I got elected, and I had been following the case, following the motions. So I had quite a bit of knowledge right from the get-go. And then I think within a week of me coming on board, I asked Charles and Jesse to give me the file so I could read through the file, and had quite a bit of knowledge going into it right from the beginning. So I was fortunate that the hard work that they had already put in was already laid the groundwork for what we were going to do going forward.
Cameron.
Sorry. For me, I was already going back and forth. I felt like I lived basically almost in Brunswick. So we were already going back and forth for different motions and things as that. And then the election came up, and then Mr. Brody arrived. But I mean, for me, it was just kind of like a big study session. He came in, he was very eager, he was very interested. Everyone put their information in, don't forget this or don't forget that, or let me show you my notes. So it was a pretty smooth transition, and we went back down there with him and did the work.
Charles, please.
All right. So I am from Fulton County also. I was running the gang unit as an assistant chief investigator. And I heard how great Cobb was from Linda, so I decided I would run over to Cobb too, to the mountains of Marietta, for a little easier living. And who knew that at the beginning of my tenure, I came in November of 2019, and we had COVID hit, and then we had the judicial emergency. And we got hit with this case around, was it May, Linda? Yeah, we got assigned this case in May. So it was okay from our end, as an investigator at district attorney's office, it's hit or miss. You could have a lot of work to do. You could have a little bit of work to do. The blessing with us was we got it assigned at the same time, almost simultaneously with the GBI. So we were able to get on track with those guys. By that Wednesday, we got assigned on Sunday. By that Wednesday, I was already down in Brunswick with the GBI of having those meetings, have those briefings. And it was an easy process from the beginning with us to work through with everybody.
So we did get assigned the case in May. So the GBI was brought in by Tom Durden, and then he recused himself once he understood that he didn't have the resources. He's got a 5-county circuit and just not enough personnel. So he did the right thing. He went to Chris Carr and said, that's our attorney general, and said, I don't have the resources. You need to reassign this. And so once it was assigned to the Cobb County District Attorney's Office, we were all brought in, and Charles was able to go ahead and immediately work with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. We got the case file together and we kind of ran with it. Now, we knew there was an election coming up, but you have a trial team, and the DA heads that trial team. But as Flynn said, he was aware of it, knew about it. And when he was elected, Joyette and Flynn did a wonderful job of transitioning, incredibly professional. It was a seamless transition. When Flynn came on, we just briefed him about what was going on with the case, where we were with the case, because January was these motions deadlines. The defense had till December 31st of 2020 to file their motions, and we had till January 31st to respond in writing to all the motions in preparation for the May 2021 motions hearing. So yes, we kept him completely up to date, and it was actually a very smooth transition with the DA and the election.
Okay, I want to shift to Charles for a second because, when we think, and again, this is from the average Joe terms, when we think about investigators, we probably think about Scooby-Doo in a Scooby-Doo van and they're looking for all these clues and, where do you start? So I want you to kind of paint a picture of where you had to start when you have almost 4 vigilantes and like 1 victim. What are you looking for? Like fingerprints, like put us in the mind of an investigator in a case like this.
I guess you had to differentiate between an investigator from a police department or a law enforcement agency that's on track, right? When we get our stuff at the DA's office, we're kind of reactive. The case has already happened, something's already in process, and now we're following something based on what the first lead detective did. So it's kind of it's a tricky question to answer. From our end, GBI agent, Special Agent Richard Dial, he was on par. He was jammed up with everything. He would answer the phone calls. He didn't need training, so he was able to jump in and help us out. And from the get-go, we had the video, but the video is not enough because if Linda would tell you if the video doesn't get admitted, we still got to prove the case. So there are a number of things you have to do outside of that. You have to interview witnesses. One question that came up also about the evidence of forensic evidence, which Linda did a great job introducing with the medical examiner. All that stuff plays a part on our end. It's kind of piecing the puzzle together. From the front end, if I was the lead detective, it would have been kind of like you said, but mine's the Scooby-Doo part, right? Of getting the warrants together, doing the search warrants, interviewing witnesses, finding witnesses, scouring that incident scene, and really putting the work in up front. That's the only difference.
Okay, I'm gonna shift to Cameron because Cameron, currently you're the director of security, correct? For Cobb?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
tell me about your role in this. For those that don't know, like myself, tell me about your role in this.
So I also came from Flint County. I was in the.
Who did y'all leave? If all y'all left, who's left outside of Miss Willis? Who's left?
They have other people there that are great. We're rooting for them. So I was in the public integrity unit, and in the public integrity unit, we investigated all officer-involved shootings in the county, all deaths inside any Flint County jail, all misconduct of any public official. So I was kind of used to already starting from the ground up with an investigation because I was the one out there doing it. So when Chief Prescott brought me on over to Cobb, I remember coming in, it was COVID. It was like, oh, welcome, Cameron, we're glad you're here. It's COVID. Also, get out. So then finally come back, and I remember it was literally a thumb drive, just a thumb drive like this. It's like, this is the case. And then it grew, paperwork, and then it grew to literally a big brick, like a big terabyte of information. So for me, while Chief Prescott is down in Brunswick getting information, he's texting me, he's calling me, relaying me information. I'm reading through text messages. I'm looking on the map because I had no idea where Brunswick was. So it's kind of like putting a puzzle together, a huge puzzle together. So you don't know immediately what fits, what goes where, but you have to keep working it to get the bigger picture.
Okay.
Can I ask along those lines as well? Because I know that there were hundreds of pieces. I think I remember Attorney Janikowski saying at one point there was like 400 or so pieces of potential evidence. Like, how much do you think you may have gathered versus how much you were actually able to admit or that made sense? Because one of the questions I had just kind of watching is, how do you decide who to talk to? Like, there were so many different people to interview, people in the neighborhood, the homeowner, people in like surrounding businesses who may or may not have seen them. Like, there's so many different questions that may be asked, and then people who may be able to answer those questions. So how do you prioritize, and like, where do you think, like, how do you know when along the case to like focus your attention at all?
So for me, I talk to everybody. If your name's in the report, I'm talking to you. If your name is in text messages, I'm knocking at your door. Subpoenaing you, I'm reporting back to Linda, to Paul, to Larissa, hey, this is what we got, this is what they said. From there, after gathering that information, whether people in the neighborhood have seen Ahmaud running or not, I'm still gonna talk to you. And from there, I pass it to the attorneys, and they prioritize, who should we bring in, what information is important.
All right, so let's move into strategy. So Linda, I'm coming to you. So let's move into strategy. How did you guys develop the strategy? Because to the public, after we saw the video, most of us, okay, this is the open case shut, case like this. We saw this. This should be easy to prove, but I know for a prosecutor, that's not how that works. So how did you develop the strategy? That's not how that works. So how did you develop the strategy? Which reading articles, everybody called you brilliant. And I heard you got like a slew of followers on social media because you became like the popular person. So how did you develop the strategy?
All right. So our team got together and we brainstormed constantly. All right. So this wasn't just oh, hey, here's a really good idea. That is not how that took place at all. We would sit together in meetings. We would do mind maps. We would talk about our evidence because everything is evidence-based. So what we first did after Charles went down and Cameron and the GBI they did a great job. They interviewed everybody. They canvassed all the neighborhoods, both Ahmaud's neighborhood as well as Satilla Shores. They did a really good job. But of course, our job as attorneys is to review all of that evidence, look at all the video statements, review what everyone said, look at all of the social media, look at all of the text messages. So we had to go through all that evidence. And then we wanted to brainstorm. We would get together with each other and throw ideas around and talk about what it is that we needed in order to prove our case. Now, in the state of Georgia, in order to prove murder or felony murder, and murder is malice murder, where you intend to kill someone, or there's an abandoned and malignant heart, meaning the intent is just you just don't care, or felony murder, where you're committing a felony, and because you're committing that felony, during that felony, someone dies. So for both of those types of murder in the state of Georgia, the state does not have to prove premeditation, and the state does not have to prove motive. It has to prove intent, meaning you intended to do the act. It can't be an accident or a mistake of fact, but the state doesn't have to prove why you did it, because sometimes we have no idea why people do some things. And you can't really prove what's in the heart of somebody unless there's some sort of manifestation outside. So we started looking at our case. We put together our indictment, and of course we charged murder, felony murder, aggravated assault with the pickup trucks, aggravated assault with the shotguns, and then criminal attempt at false imprisonment on Burford, and then actual false imprisonment on Holmes Drive, where Mr. Arbery was killed. And those were the elements of our indictment, because at that time, Georgia did not have a hate crime statute on the books. So we did not charge that, and therefore we did not have to prove that. And so one of our strategic decisions, and we brainstormed about it a lot. We were brainstorming about it in 2020 as well as into 2021 through motions, everything, about do we bring up this racial hatred, racial animus, the prejudice and everything like that, or do we limit it more towards vigilantism, which is what it looked like these guys were really involved with. It was, we're entitled, we get to act as vigilantes, we're going to go ahead and terrorize someone and chase them through the streets because we're entitled to do this. And so we strategically thought about what to do with this, because we did not want to try and prove something that we didn't have to prove in order to obtain a murder conviction.
I like that. I like that. Jury selection between Brody and Linda. What was that like? Like, this is not a predominantly African-American place. So what were the thoughts? Were you really apprehensive about it? Did you have to come up with some kind of strategy? What were the thoughts on jury selection going into it?
All right. Well, first off, Flynn was really essential. He was behind the scenes. He actually stayed throughout jury selection, and we all would like interview the jurors, and then we'd all get together and brainstorm. Walking into it, actually, Cobb County and Brunswick are percentage-wise similarly situated.
I actually believe that. Now I think about that.
Yeah, the populations, even though they're not the same numbers, it is percentage-wise similarly situated. So we went down, though, knowing it was a much smaller community, and that we would encounter people who not only knew the McMichaels, but knew some of the witnesses, knew the police officers. And it was a much different situation than, say, we'd have up in Cobb, where we have larger numbers up here. So one of the things Judge Walmsley did, and he was really, really good about allowing both the defense and the state to engage in thorough examination of the jurors to determine if they had any prejudice or biases resting on their minds. And we really interviewed these people and got great jurors. We had a lot of people who were really honest. They came in and they said, no, I can't be fair and impartial. I've seen the video and I've already made up my mind. And so they self-selected themselves out. And a lot of people don't realize that. We've gotten a lot of questions. Well, why didn't you have more African-American jurors? A lot of them self-selected themselves out by coming in and honestly telling us, I can't be fair and impartial to the defendants. I feel they're guilty already. And so therefore they could not be seated. We then, of course, talked to people about the fact that they may have seen the video, but the video is not the whole story. And part of our questioning was to determine if they were open to basing their verdict only on the evidence we presented within the four walls, because there was much more to that day. They chased Mr. Arbery for 5 minutes, but that video is only about a minute long. So there's 4 minutes where you don't see them chasing him. You don't see Mr. Bryan trying to run him off the road with his pickup truck, trying to hit him, trying to cut him off. So there was a lot more to it that the jurors were unaware of. And we wanted to make sure that the jurors we selected were willing to listen to all of the evidence and render a verdict solely on the law that Judge Walmsley gave them, and also on the evidence only presented within the four walls of that courtroom.
And Ricardo, I think it was critical that we wanted to make sure that these guys got a fair trial. And the only way to do that was to make sure that we had impartial jurors. And I think one thing that Linda didn't mention was we tried to focus on jurors that had not lived in Brunswick their entire life, because we wanted to make sure that some of that bias that might have been there from growing up wasn't in the juror panel. So that was critical, and it was very important. The way we asked the questions, the way we looked at the jurors, and just like many people thought, they wondered, how did we end up with a jury that was which was almost totally all white, and how that would affect the outcome of the trial. And I fielded a lot of questions about that. But the one thing I told everybody, I think we have fair, impartial jurors that are going to listen to the evidence, and that's all we could ask for as prosecutors.
All right, I want to shift to Charles, and then I'm gonna come to Cameron. When you guys, because I know you guys were receiving a lot of stuff. So what was the first red flag you noticed when you got the stuff that you got, the evidence and all that good stuff? What was one of the first red flags that went off when you started going through stuff? I'm gonna start with you, Charles.
I mean, for us, because initially I went down with, I was down on the street with Dial. We were part of all the canvases that took place with the neighbors at that time. We had just missed the sweep of Stella Shores. But as we started getting evidence, started piling evidence up and sending evidence back, the interviews were one thing that stood out to us the most, from on scene to the interviews they did with law enforcement at the time. So those stood out to us. Statements stood out to us between Roddy Bryant, between being re-interviewed, and I'll let Linda get into that later. But those things happened, and there were a couple of different meetings we had where we had to go back and forth. In my memory, I don't remember if Linda went on some of those meetings with us. I know when we decided to make certain arrests at certain times because of the evidence we saw, we put it back together in Cobb.
All right, Cameron, what about you?
The biggest red flag was the video. Outside of the video, I think the thing that stood out to me the most, I remember it was maybe like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. I'm still in the office. And initially I was just listening to the interviews at the police department with Travis and Greg, and just listening to the questioning, listening to the answers, listening to how certain questions were phrased. To me, it was like, uh-oh, like this is going to get bigger than what I even imagined, because it didn't add up. And I just kept thinking back on my training and my experience, like, well, I wonder why they didn't ask this, or why didn't they follow up on that? They get to leave still. So to me, that was the small snowball that got it rolling.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question because I want to gauge this. So we're preparing for trial, and I'm definitely want to ask Cameron, Brody, and Prescott, going in as African Americans, and I would say watching the video, how did you feel going into this? Like, we brainstormed all that stuff. How were you guys feeling going into this, watching a Black young youth be vigilantilized by these individuals? Like, how did you feel preparing for this case? What were your thoughts like?
Well, I'll be honest and say I was scared. I was very scared. I was very nervous. The first time that I saw the video, I didn't believe it. I thought whoever edited this like this, they need to go to jail. Whoever thought this would be funny, it's not funny. But then, you know, when you have your chief in your office, when you're going to Flynn's office, when you have Linda sitting in there on ready, and it's like, this is not a joke. You know, so for me, probably one of the youngest in the office, and I have nephews, you know, that were close to Ahmaud's age. It was very eye-opening, you know, just to think, you know, if I get up and I take my dog out for a jog, like, oh my God, you know, I'll even admit now, you know, going to look at new construction homes. For me, I can't do that without thinking about Ahmaud.
Wow.
It was scary, but it was also empowering to say, wow, for whatever reason, I get to be a part of this so that it doesn't happen again.
Charles?
All right, I think for me, the biggest thing, remember the video came out before we were assigned the case. So seeing the video initially as a Black man with a 16-year-old son, I know I'm sitting down, so you don't see how big I am, but my son is 6'2", 300 pounds. He's the offensive lineman. And me and him were jogging the next day. And I knew I had to address it because it had hit social media already. The difficulty I had to explain was, I don't know what I would do if someone stopped us right now and told us to stop with guns waving. Not knowing the next week, we'd be working this case hands-on. And my wife can tell you, there was a time in the morning, he said, Dad, I'm going to take a jog to get ready for football. I'm like, why are you jogging? He's like, we always jog. And it was one morning in particular, I stood at the driveway with tears in my eyes. My wife was holding my hand as I watched him run up and down the road because I felt I couldn't let him run by himself. So when you add all that stuff together and what was going on in the world at the time, with the difficulty of what it is to be a Black man and having to never really fitting in with, you know, you're never gonna be Black enough for Black Lives Matter. You're never gonna be blue enough for Blue Lives Matter. So we're always in this position as a Black male in law enforcement. You gotta sit down the middle, and it's a lonely place to sit. And what I had to do was zone out the noise and just get the work done. Because when we look at it, me and Linda and Cameron, we've been through enough cases where we've had some difficult cases with very little evidence. When we looked at it for what it was, proving the case wasn't going to be the problem for us. It was all the noise from the outside. So I had to turn off all the noise from the outside and just button down and focus on it.
All right, Brody, your thoughts?
You know, the first time I saw the video as a prosecutor, the first thing I said is, these guys got to be held accountable. And then when I started doing the research of that community in that area and some of the things that had came out of there before, I started realizing how difficult that job was going to be. And I'll give you I don't know if you've seen the movie One Night in Miami, where Jim Brown is outside the house, and the daughter comes out and says she needs some furniture moved. And Jim Brown is willing to help, but of course he won't let him in the house. And we already all know why. Well, that area was Glenn County. And so that was reflective in my mind about the area that we were looking at. So as an African-American male, I was like, you know, are we going to find justice in a place like this? And literally, and I probably shouldn't say this, but when Linda took over, I sort of gave Linda a stump speech, more or less. I basically told Linda, I said, I need a white person to tell these white people that what these white men did was wrong. And you know, it's sad that I had to say it like that, but I really felt that if it was someone other than Linda, it might have not have happened. But I was confident in her, and I was confident in the trial team and the investigators, everybody that was down there, part of that team, and the work that they did, that we were going to get the conclusion that we wanted, and we did.
I had a quick follow-up question to that too, not just about the racial element, but about the noise, I think, and about the emotional charge of this case too. And I thought, so ADA Janikoski, I'm curious about the coordination between you and Ahmaud's family. And you don't have to speak on Wanda or Marcus. Maybe it's just generally with the prosecuting team and the family, especially if the victim is deceased. Do you form personal relationships, and does that help to inform your job representing them or representing the state? Or actually, do you make a point to avoid those things? Does that make it more challenging? Does that become distracting? Like, how does the emotional factor play a role in like your ability to put forth your best case?
Well, before you answer that, because I saw an article that said the family referred to you as Auntie Linda by the end of the trial. I do my research, so I was blown away. I was going to ask you about that, but since she put it up there, I was like, oh my God, they call her Auntie Linda by the end of the case.
Well, this was, as you know, an extraordinary case and extraordinary circumstances. So first off, Wanda Cooper Jones is a wonderful, wonderful woman who, thank goodness, pushed justice for her son. Okay. And so she really did get the dominoes to fall so that people who might not have prosecuted it the way we prosecuted it were, you know, meaning the second DA was out of the picture due to the conflict of interest. And that recusal was appropriate. Tom Durden, of course, got it. And he realized, I don't have the resources to necessarily do this the way it needs to be done. And that was the right thing to do. But you got to realize, by the time she got to us in May, she'd been through 3 district attorney's offices and the Glenn County Police Department. And so we had to win her and Marcus Arbery's trust, because of course they were in a position of, we haven't really felt on solid ground, and who's our next prosecutor going to be? And so that was a process. The other fun thing with this was COVID. Normally in a situation like this, we'd of course gone to the family's house and met with them. We'd of course had them to our offices to meet with them, but we were not prosecuting in Cobb County. We didn't live in Glenn County. And it was very, very, very difficult because this was COVID. And in 2020, there were no vaccines. So everyone was very, very cautious. So when we would go down, we would meet with the families. But of course, it was that very 6-foot distance. Everybody's got their mask on, and you're trying to develop, you know, trust and a connection and inform the victim's family. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. This is why we're doing it. This is the process that we're going through with the criminal justice system. Here's what's going to happen next. And I think over time, because we were so communicative, we were good about making those phone calls. We have a victim witness advocate that we could not have done this without. Her name is Cindy Bard. She was fabulous. She maintained constant communication with the family members to keep them posted and updated, especially when we, the attorney team, couldn't do it because we were out interviewing witnesses or on trial with other cases. So that was what was going on. Over time, of course, the more we got to know each other, the more we came together for motions hearings and other things. My position has always been, the family can always tell me something because they can see things that I can't see. So I always listen to the victims' families. I want to know what they see. I want to know what they hear. I want to know what they think, because sometimes when I'm focused and in my zone, I'm not seeing something that they may see. So I always take advice and counsel from the victim's family. So we did meet with them and sought their advice and counsel as we move forward. And even during the trial, always checked in with them on a daily basis to see if they were seeing something that maybe we weren't seeing.
All right. So night before the trial, what was you guys' very last meeting like? The night before the trial happens, the very last meeting, what was on everybody's mind and what was the thought? And I'll start with Brody. Since you're the leader, I'll start with you. The very last meeting before the trial starts, what was going through your mind? You know, what was the finalized word? This is what we're doing. This is our strategy.
You know what? I actually felt a calm. because I was glad it was going to get started. I was confident that we had the evidence, that the law was on our side, that we had a good jury picked. We started getting some buzz from some outside sources about what we were doing, but I told those outside sources, say, look, I'm confident in our team, I'm confident in our strategy, I'm confident in everything that we've got going on. The morning before the trial began, we prayed with the family, and everything rolled from that point.
All right, Charles.
I think by the time we got to trial time, Cameron came in because of her role as a special investigator. And I knew this case was going to be so big that there were going to be certain aspects I couldn't control when it came towards trial. I.e., she's director of security, but I took over security for this trial because it was so many moving parts. We had so many people to worry about, right? For instance, not only were we responsible for the team in Brunswick, but they got families back home that we had to coordinate with. We had moving parts with witnesses, moving parts with Ahmaud's family, with Ms. Cooper Jones and with Mr. Marcus. So for me, I was high strung on a different aspect because I knew for them to do what they need to do on the inside, I had to be who I was going to be on the outside. So, I mean, I was on between 1 and 10, I was on a 25.
Okay, that's pretty high. You do realize that's pretty high.
Well, Linda, I'll tell you.
Cameron.
I agree with DA Brody. We've had so many meetings. I can't exactly remember the last one before the storm. But I remember feeling very calm. We prepped, we've hit the ground running, we reviewed, we've talked, we've met, and we've met, and we've met. So this is it, this is it. I remember waking up the next morning, everybody's kind of in their zone, we're focused, and we get that last text message like, rollout time is at such a clock. And I think that's when I got a little hype, like we wrote now. We didn't come this way to come this way for nothing. We gonna do it. So I thought it was a pretty good vibe.
All right, Linda, being the front runner of this particular case and not being African American, how high were the stakes for you going into this?
Oh, that's an odd question. And the reason I say that's odd is because I never thought this was about me at all, ever. This case was about Ahmaud Arbery and about justice for the family. And to me, the stakes were all about getting justice for them. So when we went into this, we luckily got down there a week early to prep, to make sure that we were comfortable where we were at, to make sure we had gone into the courthouse, that everything was set up the way it needed to be, that we could go and make sure all of our witnesses were subpoenaed and everything was set. So right before, there was kind of two first starts. There was the start of jury selection, which is, the unknown, because Judge Walmsley was from Chatham County, Savannah. The defense attorneys, except for Mr. Goff, who represented Mr. Bryan, were also from out of town, and we were from out of town. So we were all guests at the Glenn County Courthouse. This was not home turf for anybody. So jury selection, it was sort of like trying to get used to what are we going to be doing for jury selection? And we knew it was going to take a while. We were looking at panels of 20 people a day. And so that first process, it was exciting and exhausting, and we managed to get through it. Then the second, of course, came opening statements. And so I'm the kind of person I was up at 2, 3 in the morning and rewriting the opening statement because it had to be perfect. And that's just how I am. So once we got through jury selection and we had our jury impaneled and we felt good, we've gotten great jurors, fair and impartial jurors, this is what we're going to do. Then it was all about opening statement and then just presenting the evidence. And we felt very good about our evidence. So I was really focused at that point on that opening statement.
Can I ask, is that the timeline you expected? Like the 2+ business weeks, like 11 or so days? Is that what you were thinking? Did that exceed your expectations for how long order would take?
I have a saying called victory through paranoia. And I basically told everybody, we're going to be here through Thanksgiving. And they would go, oh no. And I go, I'm really hoping we're not. Let's hope for better. Let's see if we can get through jury selection in a week and a half. Anytime you predict a week and a half, double it. This trial will take a week to put up. It'll take 2 weeks to put up. So there's part of me that said it jokingly, but there was part of me that also wanted to sort of set the expectation that this may take a lot longer than we think it's going to take. And I wanted us to all be prepared for that. So I was surprised that jury selection did take longer than anticipated. We did not move as quickly as I felt we could have. But on the other hand, it allowed us to do the job and do it really well. And that's why I think we got such good, fair, and impartial jurors.
All right, so the case starts and we're going, Linda, were there any curveballs early on that you were thrown when this case first started and you were in court? Anything that kind of caught you off guard?
Okay, so I'm sure everyone noticed that the technology didn't exactly work the way Linda wanted it to work during her opening statement. All right, so we once again were guests there. And we had been rehearsing the technology because the defense put up certain video evidence in their opening. We put up certain video evidence in our opening. The problem is that the courtroom itself was very small. Remember, once again, this is COVID. So we've got some jurors in the box and we've got some jurors seated behind the prosecution table, and our table's at an angle. And then on the other side of the courtroom, there's a row for the defendant's family members, there's a row for the media, and then there was a row for the victim's family members, and that was it. So a very small courtroom. And because the Constitution requires public and open trials, they had to go ahead and provide an extra space in the courthouse, which they did, where they showed the video of the trial. And so what they had to do is they had to push the video into this other space. But they couldn't really test that until we went live, because then they'd be pushing the evidence into a space that's unmonitored and people would have seen it before we started trial. So you see how there's a catch-22. And so our tech guys, when they went to go push it, all of a sudden WebEx started going all kind of wonky. And I just, how about this? That's happened to me before. So not the first time my technology has crashed and burned on me. So I just went, okay, it's doing this, and I moved on. But it's because I've been there and done that and wasn't going to let it fluster me or get all worried about it, because I understood that technology can be fickle. The one moment you need it, there it goes, boom, like that. So that's how it started off.
Thank God you were a pro and you were able to bounce back from that, because yeah. Okay, Charles and Cameron, I'm gonna start with you, Cameron. Was there a moment while the case was going that was concerning for you guys? A moment where you were just like, oh, like, I didn't see that, or something like that for you guys when y'all were watching the trial or being around it?
Typically for me, like once it started, me and Chief, we kind of flip-flopped, so if he was outside, roving for security, I was inside. But then if DA Brody came, now I'm switching. I'm thinking, okay, now we have our attorneys in the courtroom and we're not on home turf. And now I need to figure out how I'm going to get, DA Brody in, out, around, and back out again, without anyone noticing. I just need to make it seamless. It was all magic. A lot of stress, but he made it. But I think the biggest curveball that I did not see coming, I believe it was during closings. And Laura Hogue talked about Ahmaud's dirty toenails. And I remember kind of looking at Miss Wanda, and I thought, this lady's brave, because that was the hardest moment, because we prepped with them, we sat with them, we met with them, we strategized with Linda, Paul, and Larissa, what all could they say? But I don't think any of us saw that coming, but I think the pictures that we picked out of Ahmaud and his shoes and his in-life picture, I think that overshadowed any negative comments that were trying to be said about him.
Charles?
All right, there we go. I had the utmost confidence in the team and what we put together. I've been to war with Linda before, and I know that too much wasn't going to fluster her. And seeing the evidence from the get-go, I kind of knew where we were going to be in a good place. So for me, nothing threw me trial-wise as much as a lot of stuff did on the outside. And And that's where my mind was, and that's where we were. I mean, that's why I spent the majority of the trial outside, dealing with the crowd, dealing with antics, dealing with whatever security threats, security concerns came up. I think for me, maybe the biggest day we really went on high alert was when the new Black Panther Party showed up with the weapons.
Oh,
But once they're like anybody else, all they want to do is be heard, right? You talk to them, speak with them, and I mean, anytime they show up, they march down the street. So making sure we fix those relationships, because you got this odd thing of being an outsider. So we're not from Glenn County, so I'm able to come speak on behalf of law enforcement side, and also I'm Black, so they were more willing to listen to me and whoever else would come in. So for me, more or less, whatever happened on the inside, we were more worried what would happen on the outside with it.
DA Brody, was there a moment? Same question to you. Was there a moment?
Well, let me mention two things. First of all, Charles and Cameron did such a great job with the security of everyone, to the point that if my wife saw me on camera without Cameron next to me, she would text me and say, "Where's Cameron?" But the second thing, I was sitting next to Wanda when she first saw the video for the first time. She had refused to see the video up until the trial. And so I was sitting next to her when she saw the video for the first time. And so, the wave of emotion that hit her, the wave of emotion that hit me at the time, I don't think I was prepared for that. But I can understand how she was feeling watching her son being murdered. So that was probably the biggest thing. And the other thing was, just all the outside noise. Literally everything that happened in that trial, we got scrutinized for. And so every time I stepped out of the courtroom, my phone was ringing. I was getting text messages about what we were doing. It was just incredible how many people had their opinions about the trial and how we were messing it up and all that stuff. And even to the point where Ben Crump, after the trial, came and apologized because he didn't think we were going to get a guilty verdict. But he apologized and thanked us for our work.
Wow. Okay. So I have actually a question for Sarah. All right. So were you the one that was handling all the social media and things while this case was going on? Was that you?
So my supervisor, Latonia Hines, she was managing most of the communication with the media. And since I was still new, I didn't have a whole lot of credibility. My role was more so assisting the prosecutors and doing whatever they needed, whether it was social media investigating or, like I said, printing out something and running it to them. I assisted a little bit with the press conference, sort of working with the Georgia Bear investigation. Nellie Miles, the PIO over there, they gave us a lot of information on how we shouldn't do certain things. We had to prepare for both. We had to prepare for guilty, and we had to prepare for if they were acquitted, because you could imagine if they weren't, it would have been chaos. And that's all I'll really say as far as that, because again, I was so new. I was trying to help in any capacity I could. So,
well, I asked everybody else about their feelings, so I want to ask you too, because like you said, even doing those smaller things and still seeing everybody's level of anxiety and things of that magnitude, what was it like for you?
Wow. I'm a runner myself. And when it all happened, I was actually in North Carolina and I was working for a law enforcement agency at the time. And it was really tense for a lot of reasons. And this was one of those incidents in that COVID George Floyd era, I'll call it, that was completely traumatizing for me as a runner, because I have grown up with people of all backgrounds, all ethnicities. I've always had friends of color, and it hit me because Ahmaud's very close to my age. I'm 29. And for me to meet his mother, it was a lot. I was very emotional during that trial because I felt so connected to him, and still to this day, I feel his presence a lot when I go on runs. And again, for my career, this was huge because I got to experience how to approach and avoid and pretty much be in a national level trial. So again, I was honored. I was shipped off after being here for a month with a bunch of people I didn't know. And we were all essentially living together. And it was an incredible talk about being immersed in something. We were all truly together. Like Linda was saying, they slept, we were all sharing homes and everything. So it was a lifetime, once in a lifetime experience, truly.
So if you want me to move to Ricardo, I do have at least one more quick thing. Ideally two, but I definitely wanted to hear really quickly from you as well, Linda, about the defense team and their just tactics and things that came up. I'm really surprised to hear that anybody thought it wasn't a lock. Like after the first, I think, day or so, I was like, oh, this is done. Like the rest of this has just got to be a formality. So I'd love to kind of know what for you was either a little surprising or even a little just strange, because it felt like maybe it was 1 against 3 sometimes as just a viewer. It felt like, okay, there's one prosecutorial team and there are 3 different defense attorneys who are very often at odds with each other about, well, we're not going with that, or we agree, but not for this. So how was that? How was that for you? And like, was any of it just a little bizarre or challenging?
Well, what most people don't realize is that half the battle is fought before you ever start the trial. And that battle is fought because you serve all the discovery. The state has to give the defense everything. Here's the witness list, here's all the evidence, and here's everything. So what we did was we actually put the entire evidence list together, because a lot of it in this day and age is digital, it's electronic, it's statements, it's video, it's audio recordings, it's a lot of that. And we served it on them. And we prepared in advance with an entire exhibit list and gave it to the defense, because we didn't want to hear any complaints of, I never received this, I don't know anything about this. So they had everything in advance. Then we went ahead and did the motions practice. And so a lot of the battle was fought in May of 2021 during those motions hearings that Larissa and I handled, because they were trying to get in evidence about Ahmaud, even though they had never met him a day in their lives. They didn't know anything about him. They didn't know his name. They knew nothing about him, but somehow they wanted his character to come into evidence. And so those battles were fought before we ever got to presenting the evidence. And the other thing is that they really had to go with self-defense because of the statements. Like Charles was saying, once you listen to the defendant's statements, especially Greg McMichael actually said to the police that night, well, he must have done something. He must have committed some crime out there. Why don't you police officers go back out to Satilla Shores and find out what crime he must have committed that would then justify our behavior, that we didn't know he committed any crime. We don't have any evidence of that. And so him having said all of that, I thought, well, where are they going to go with this? Well, Greg McMichael was constantly going with, he attacked my son. So I thought, okay, they're going to have to go with this self-defense situation. The problem is, in the state of Georgia, you cannot start it and then claim self-defense. You also cannot be committing felonies like criminal attempt at false imprisonment, aggravated assault with pickup trucks, aggravated assault with shotguns. You cannot do that. You cannot pull a shotgun on an unarmed jogger, and then when he tries to run away from you, you shoot him, and then you want to claim self-defense. It was absurd. So then they had to come up with this citizen's arrest situation. That was completely lawyer made up, because not one single defendant that time, either at the scene or later at the police department, said we were trying to effectuate a citizen's arrest. We saw him commit the crime of fill in the blank, and we were trying to arrest him. Never said any of that stuff. So we knew that the evidence was on our side and the law was on our side. We were just wanting to, praying that the jury would also understand the law that Judge Walmsley gave them and the evidence that we presented, and would see how ridiculous the defense of self-defense based on a made-up citizen's arrest was, and find the right verdict, which they did.
Yeah, you're on mute, Ricardo, but we're gonna go ahead.
No, about to say that you had another question.
Yeah, I think I was just going to ask before we left about the nature of the viral video in criminal procedure for all of you. And like, I know that you've mentioned, I think before, Linda, I think you mentioned before that the video, again, was not everything. But, you know, are they more helpful than hurtful? You know, I think as far as the public is concerned, there was a lot of advocacy around this case and even like outside of the trial. But like, I'm curious, is that a good thing? Moreover, is that a challenging thing? Does that create excuses for people to say that things are less or more fair? If there's too much public engagement, do the videos provide like clarity? Should this be like something everybody's trying to do when they see something happening? Like, I just want to know in general, like, was the video a help or a hurt? And then maybe even like advocacy in the criminal justice process, is that helpful or hurtful?
Well, first off, videos for trial purposes are always helpful. What normally would happen, and Charles and Cameron can speak to this as well, is that usually we get some surveillance video. We have a gas station video or apartment complex video or some sort of roadway video that helps us solve the crime because it helps identify the perpetrators. And the video has gotten much, much better these days. In fact, most places you go, you are on video. The store, you know, even walking into the mobile phone store, you're on video. So in this case, there was going to be video because it was taken by defendant Brian. What rarely ever happens is to have a defendant release that video to the public for the public scrutiny. And that is the aspect that made this case much more challenging because it created a lot of background commentary, like Flynn was saying, a lot of people who had opinions about it. But what it did is also made jury selection very hard for us because a lot of jurors came in and self-selected themselves out. They would have been fair and impartial jurors had none of the evidence in our case been presented via social media. They would have been able to come in and go, I don't know anything about this case. I've heard a little bit about it on the news, but I can be fair and impartial. Instead, we had a lot of both black and white jurors walk in and say, I've seen the video, that's not self-defense, and they self-selected themselves out. So it made it much more challenging to voir dire and interview those jurors to see if they could be fair and impartial and to see if the opinions they had formed, if they had formed any opinions at all, were such that would keep them from being good jurors in the case. So while the video, like I said, we do try a lot of homicides with video in it, and the video is very, very helpful to securing a conviction. These were unusual circumstances that we were facing. Was really the challenge.
All right, so for time's sake, let's fast forward. We've gone through the case and now we're at closing statements. At that point, I want to do a feelings check. How was everybody feeling by the time we got the closing arguments? Start with Charles. How was everybody feeling by the time we got to that place?
Like I said, between the work that got put in on the front end from our office and the GBI with Linda, Larissa, and Paul, I mean, I was confident rolling in the closing statements that all Linda had to do next was like cross home plate once she hit the ball out the park. I had the utmost confidence that we were going to walk out with it. I always said from the beginning, all we can do is put our case up, and we put our case up the best way we can. Whatever happens after that, we did what God called us to do, and we did it. So at closing statements for me, I was kind of like a little relieved because I can get a break before a verdict came back.
Cameron?
For me, it was very confident. You know, anyone in Fulton County knows Linda's reputation. You know, if Linda doesn't do anything else, she knows how to tussle in the courtroom. And we tussled, you know, all those weeks. And, you know, it was amazing to have almost a front row seat to that. And then also feeling confident with that, you know, it was close to my birthday. So I'm like, it's gonna be my birthday and we're gonna get this conviction. We're gonna do this, you know, so I felt pretty confident with it. I thought we did, you know, pretty good.
So you had a real turn up. You turn up for your birthday and because of the guilty verdict. You had a real turn up when it was all.
I did.
DA Brody?
I was very confident, and really my confidence soared after Linda's cross with Travis. After she crossed Travis, it was obvious that he was lying. It was obvious that he didn't have a reason to be chasing Ahmaud Arbery. You could see that he was fishing for answers. And I knew Linda was going to bring it home with the close, and she did a phenomenal job. And I was actually surprised that it took the jury as long as it took them to come up with the guilty verdicts. And I think the only reason it took them so long was because they were deciding about William Waddy Bryant, and finding him not guilty on a couple of counts. But I knew, I was very confident that we were going to get the verdict.
All right, Linda, what was your thought process going into closing? Like, what was priority? How did you wrap all this up? Like, what was your thought process?
Well, first off, my entire philosophy about trial is ABC, always be closing. So everything you do in the trial, from your opening statement through every piece of evidence you put up, is to go into that closing argument to demonstrate to the jury that the state has proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt, rebutted the defense of self-defense and citizen's arrest beyond a reasonable doubt. And this is why the jury should feel completely comfortable in rendering a verdict of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I felt really good about all of our evidence. The other thing, I was lucky, and most people don't have this. The defendants' attorneys went on TV and told everyone what their closing argument was going to be in interviews with the media. And I watched them. I mean, in the week before I did my closing, I literally watched it and took notes because they were being interviewed by the media and they were rehearsing their closing arguments. So I knew what they were going to say. So it was real easy when you have advance notice. And I mean, they didn't have to do that. That was them freely and voluntarily wanting to go on the news before the trial to test out these closing arguments. So I just reviewed them and then formulated what I needed to do to rebut whatever they were going to say and whatever themes they were going to have. I did spend the evening I gave my first close and they gave their closing arguments. And then on the next day I got up. What you don't know is I spent all that evening and from about 3 a.m. to the time I gave that second closing, rewriting it about 5 more times. Because once again, for me, it had to be perfect. And so, I gave it and then I was exhausted.
It was perfect. It was perfect. I have to say, Linda, it was phenomenal. All of it was. And to that time, DA Brody too, juries also just like to deliberate, I think. I mean, I know as a juror, we were bursting to talk to each other because you're holding it in the whole time. There's so much you want to say. I also think they kind of just sit around and give each other a chance to just, I think there's some of that too, but it was phenomenal to watch.
I just want to say, Linda, that's a whole nother level of perfection. I just want to make that a point, that what you were saying, that's a whole nother level of perfection I've never seen. That even after it's done, you still, okay, that's all right. All right, so we get the guilty verdict. I want to shift that back to what I asked in the beginning for my African-Americans, you three. How did it feel getting that guilty verdict? How did your families receive it? Things of that magnitude once you guys heard the guilty verdict. I'll start with Cameron this time.
So by the time the verdicts came back, I was actually back at home. And I remember some of my neighbors were in the street actually watching it, like on iPads or whatever. And I thought, oh, here we go. This is it. And when it came back, and I had my garage door open, and when it came back, all the guilties, I could hear through my neighborhood, everyone clapping. I could hear people cheering. My oldest nephew, Caden, texted me and was like, oh my God, like you were this is great. And I'm like, yeah, it is great. It felt like a long awaited victory just for anything, So it felt really good to, of course, be a part of the team, to contribute. Then it felt really good to be able to say, we finally got this win.
Charles?
For me, I had zoned so much out of it, I didn't realize what moment I was really in, of what place we were in history with the case. So to receive all the phone calls and the texts, of course, they were excited. My wife was happy I was coming home and I wouldn't be like on level 25 anymore. So the texts from her and my son texted me. I think it hit home for me. One big thing, like me and Miss Wanda, we're from the same place. We're from Burke County, Georgia. So having the calls and the messages from Facebook, I didn't really recognize it or realize how big the moment was. We got it right before Thanksgiving. It was Thanksgiving Eve. I was actually headed to Burke County to go stay with my dad that night for Thanksgiving the next day. And it was just the ride home and that sense of relief and just realizing how big a moment we played in history and how much change was affected by the work we put in. I mean, it was big, and some days I still don't believe it. I have a sense of trying to downplay how much I actually do in my involvement in certain things. I think that's any cop for sure, but still recognizing day in, day out, it was a big moment, and I'm very appreciative of it.
DA Brody.
You know, I'm a little bit older than the rest of them. For me, I wasn't in Brunswick because my wife was in the hospital. So I was literally holding my 3-week-old daughter, watching the verdicts come in. My wife had some complications. I almost lost her. So here I am dealing with that, and then the verdicts coming in, and like I said, I was holding my 3-week-old daughter at the time, and I literally started crying, because I've grown up in a time where I've seen so many African Americans not find justice, especially here in the South, and so for the opportunity to see that, you know, justice prevailed, was just phenomenal for me at that time. And to know that I was a part of the team, was even better. To know that, you know, the things that I stand for, the things that I fought for as a soldier, that they actually can happen here in America. And so I was just thankful for Linda, Larissa, and Paul, and the rest of the team for all the work that they did, and just thankful that, you know, we sent a message to the rest of the country that the justice system works. If you believe in truth and can look past our own biases, it can work for all of us. And so I was just very thankful.
Linda, how did it feel after the verdict came in?
As they started to read the verdict, I thought to myself, okay, they did the right thing. And that's what I just calmly wrote down exactly what the verdicts were as they came in, and was just really grateful that they were smart, they were thoughtful, and that they had done the right thing.
All right, so we are down to the end, because I know all you guys are very busy. So final thoughts, and I'll start with Charles, then Cameron, then DA Brody, and lastly Linda. Final thoughts about the whole process, or anything that you want to leave with the people that are listening that now have a better grasp on this process.
My final thoughts, I was happy to see what happens when everyone comes together for something good to happen and all eyes are on it. I firmly believe we have one of the best criminal justice systems in the world when it works, but we also have one of the worst when it doesn't. So to see it come to fruition and really work on all aspects, from investigation to prosecution to the judicial side, to see everything turning at the same time, gave us hope, right? Because then we had George Floyd going right before we went. It was so many turning wheels that we're in a time now in this nation where, I mean, like DA Brody said, he saw a time where you couldn't get justice, but now holding people accountable. And also as a Black male in law enforcement, feeling that the work we do is not in vain, that what I am doing, it does count. And people who do wrong by people, they go where they deserve to go. And everyone thinks that way, regardless of what color you are. This white jury found these white men guilty. And I mean, to me, that's where it is. The world has changed, and it has changed, and it's continued. It's going to continue to change, but there's hope. No matter how bad things are, there's hope. Just give it a chance and let the system do what it does.
All right, Cameron.
I think for the young adults in my generation, I think I'm a millennial. It's so easy for us to focus on, don't laugh.
I was trying to hold it. Charles did it. I feel like he want to bust out and laugh.
He picks on me all the time. For our generation, it is so easy to focus on the negative. It is so easy to look at, the bad stuff on social media, the bad stuff on the news, the bad gossip on Clubhouse or Twitter. But I think if you get to a point where you surround yourself with good people, regardless of color, regardless of where they come from, good people do great things. And for me, that's what I took away from this case.
All right, DA Brody.
Sort of similar to what Cameron was saying. This case had it all. We saw some really bad prosecutors who felt like they were going to do favors for others and not pursue this case. We saw a prosecutor actually recuse himself and put out a statement as to what he figured the facts were, and it's something that shouldn't have happened. But then at the same time, we saw a prosecutor who said, there's something more to this, and I need help. And then we saw a team of prosecutors that said, we're going to get justice for this family. And the sad part about it is, I'm not so sure if the defendants don't release the video that this case ever comes to trial. And that's scary. Mm-hmm. That the police department had this video right from the beginning. But because of some prosecutors who decided that justice was not for communities of color, this could have been hidden forever. But Miss Wanda fought and fought and fought to the point where they originally lied to her, said that her son broke into a house and was shot by the homeowner. And if she does not continue to fight, and you got to remember, she didn't see the video. She didn't see the video till the day of the opening statements. Wow. So she didn't know what happened to her son. She refused to watch the video because she didn't want to see it. But she fought anyway, and through her faith made this happen. And I thank God for the team that we had assembled, who took this on and said we were going to find justice for this family, despite who anybody was. We didn't place labels on anyone. This was all about right versus wrong, and that's how we approached it, and that's how we focused on our jury selection. That's how we focused on the case, and that's how we got the verdict that we got. And so I'm just thankful that we still have people in this country who can look past people's colors, people's outer descriptions, and look at the inside and in their own hearts and do what's right all the time. So I'm just thankful for that.
That's the first time you've ever sounded like a preacher to me. You actually sound like a preacher. For the first time, I feel like I've been to church. Thank you, D. Brody. I feel like I've been to church today. I feel like I've been to church today. That's the first time. That's the first time you've ever sounded like that. Linda, final thoughts.
I don't think I could say it any better than my three colleagues have said it. So I will leave it at that, just to say this, that if anybody out there wants to become a law enforcement officer or a prosecutor, please do it. If you want to see the system change, if you want to be a prosecutor who brings justice to families like the Arbery family, you can be a part of it by becoming a prosecutor or by becoming a law enforcement officer.
Now you sound like a great infomercial. I like that. That sounds like a great infomercial. Simone, final thoughts?
Just really quickly that's so true. That these are important roles. The most important role in the criminal legal system, we talk about it all the time, and the roles that you're all a part of. The only thing I say is that I appreciate you all for coming on this forum and for continuing to do this work, because I also think that we have such a short attention span in this country, and we spend so much time focusing on crimes and on events and on tragedies, and there's so many headlines and coverage of these awful things that happen. And I think very rarely do people kind of hang around to see not only maybe they see the end of it, but then that's it, and they just so quickly move on. And I think that it's so important to pay attention to these wins that do happen and to these changes that do happen. Our legislature doesn't allow citizens arrest anymore. That's no longer on Georgia's books. There have been really fundamental changes that have come out of this experience, and I think a lot of that doesn't necessarily get to people's feeds and keep their attention. So I just wanted to thank you all for not just doing the work that you did during this trial, but for continuing to talk about it so that people can remain invested in the positives too, not just like the negative stuff.
All right, so I'm overwhelmed, but I definitely want to say thank you to the Avengers, the trial team in the Ahmaud Arbery case. Thank you to Linda Dulankowski, Charles Prescott, D.A. Flynn Brody, and Cameron Watson. Thank you for your service. You guys have made history. I'm honored just to be able to facilitate this conversation, which was amazing. So we will see you guys. You guys hang on, but for the audience, we will see you guys next Friday, same time, same place on the Leadership Blend Live podcast with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.